This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
Kia ora, and welcome to Diversity Dispatch, your local queer radio show. We're your hosts, Ricky
and Percy, and we're here to bring you the latest in Dunedin queer news, community projects, events, and more.
Sit back, relax, and tune into our fortnightly show hosted on OAR FM.
Let's get started.
Kia ora, whānau.
Kia ora.
Hey, Percy, how you doing?
Oh, I'm not too bad. It is getting colder, so now I can finally wear all of my outfits that I bought for myself.
I could not agree with you more. This jacket that I wore today, I just bought it in Op Shop.
Nice.
And it looks beautiful. If you've ever seen The Handmaid's Tale, I feel like one of the, rich men with the massive coats, which is, visually a vibe, but maybe not.
I was like, that is such a
emotionally.
specific example.
It is.
I know exactly what you're talking about, but...
Thank God. So we have a really interesting episode today. I am taking the reins. Percy has not really been informed on much of it at all. So today's episode has a lot to talk about anxiety and ways of managing your anxiety. But when I say this, I'm not meaning go out for walks. Try not to be so anxious.
Do some yoga.
Exactly. Specifically, there's one type of therapy that I've tried recently, and I want to talk about it.
All right.
But before I do, I'm going to first discuss the normal amount of anxiety that I typically deal with. I've sort of struggled with anxiety for the longest time. In public specifically, if I'm having to leave the house to go to the supermarket or to a job or working a customer-facing job or just anywhere that's outside of my own bedroom, there is a level of anxiety that sort of spikes with that.
Yeah.
So for the ever since I moved out of home really, my anxiety has been quite an issue, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Which has only really gotten worse over time as, I've started to have panic attacks and stuff. And with each one of those that you have in public, the anxiety around having one also increases.
Yeah.
So it's quite common for people that suffer from panic attacks to develop agoraphobia.
Yep.
Which makes a lot of sense since just being in public could be a danger to you. And also if you start to say hyperventilate or whatever, all of the symptoms that come with that, which mine are I go nonverbal, I can't speak, I hyperventilate, I can't move, I start shaking a lot. And for people who don't have experience dealing with that, it looks quite scary to them, which fair enough. It can look quite scary. So then people are usually like, oh my God, what do we do? Ambulance it? Which you do not need an ambulance. Unless it's super severe, which I haven't had one, thankfully, that has been that severe. So first of all, some fun tips. If somebody is having a panic attack, quite often what they actually need is seclusion. And they need to feel as if they're invisible so that the perception that is on them that has heightened their anxiety can reduce. And for me to fully recover from a severe panic attack, it probably takes me at least 2 days to fully
definitely.
So for me, anxiety is quite a massive thing. Do you suffer from anxiety?
Oh my God, yeah. Actually, interestingly enough, I'll just lean a little bit closer to the mic. Nobody has formally said, oh, this was a misdiagnosis, but I strongly believe that when I was younger, I was misdiagnosed with social anxiety, but it was actually just autism and the fear of being perceived as weird or wrong in some way that manifested as social anxiety. So that was the first ever sort of, label
also,
that I was given.
On that note, once you get given a label that sort of encompasses one part of your struggle, therefore people, any further symptoms on top of that, they're like, oh no, but you have this stuff.
Yep. Or they say, oh, you have too many comorbid mental health or disability issues, and therefore we can't diagnose you with this other thing. And so the other thing I actually wanted to add as well is, and this is because a lot of my anxiety is derived from my disability rather than being anxiety on its own. I know that it all kind of contributes to each other and feeds into each other, but I've never really seen – my anxiety's always been a symptom of a bigger thing rather than a, I guess – mental health thing on its own. That kind of makes sense.
I would agree with that completely because, like, as somebody who wasn't, assessed for being neurodivergent as like a young person, and going through, say, the education system and everything being built for people that are a very particular way, and if you don't learn this way, if you don't read this way, if you don't operate well within groups of people with like bright lights and loud noises and things, then like, sorry babe, the world's just not for you. You're going to have such a hard time, so you should just change and be normal. Yeah,
you either learn, I find that it kind of goes one of two ways. It's very much with like, I guess, people kind of recovering from religious trauma too. You either go like all the way one end where you are really struggling to like even get to an achieved sort of in terms of your like academic performance, where you go the other way and you learn the system and you memorize it and then you're great at it, but then you get to university and you just crash immediately. So it's one of the two or a combination. Actually, the other thing I did want to add as well, when you were sort of talking about panic attacks, I think an interesting thing is a lot of people assume that all panic attacks look the same, and that it's like, you're sitting there, you're hyperventilating, you like maybe you pass out, or you're crying and like freaking out, which is for some people, but I find a lot of mine tend to be like kind of that state of catatonia where you literally, you can't move, you can't speak, like you have to like lie on the floor.
And that's like, I've sort of noticed that that's quite a common way for like people with autism or ADHD for theirs to sort of come out to the surface, because obviously neurodivergent people have basically been told the whole time, like, no, you need to reduce
it's
what you're doing in your body. You need to stop.
Oh, sorry, you go.
You need to stop like fidgeting so much. You need to stop moving. You need to stop being so loud. You need to stop looking around the room. You need to just stay. So it's like, if you're in a state of panic, your instinct is basically to reduce your being as much as possible, and that's, and even in that, like, there's obviously no conscious decision on how a panic attack actually comes to the surface, but it's more so just like a response.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that like a lot of, I mean, that's a whole separate conversation, but I do believe that a lot of disability, quote unquote, care is based around how to make yourself more palatable to other people rather than other people catering for you.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, no, definitely. Actually, and kind of to bounce off of the sort of panic attacks subject, I remember I was chatting to my therapist the other day, and she focuses on not necessarily like talk therapy, like CBT type stuff, but she focuses more on how you hold like physically trauma in your body. And so looking at like the nervous system. And so if you can figure out why your body is responding in a certain way, it theoretically is easier to bring yourself back from a panic attack and things like that.
Yeah. Interesting you should say that, because that actually moves beautifully into the type of therapy that I'll be discussing.
Ooh, okay.
So I have like a few injuries in my body, specifically hamstring, adductor, all on my left side. I also have a wrist injury, but that's sort of neither here nor there. So I have been seeing somebody at the physio school as like my regular physiotherapist, and like, we've seen these injuries on this left side sort of like improve and then sort of like get worse and then improve again and then get worse. And then I've sort of somewhat recently come to terms with the fact that I have hypermobile joints, which means like for me that like my hips, the range of motion is greater than that of the average person, and also same with like my knees and my elbows and stuff. So with like exercise, which I have been prescribed a lot of it, which I'm completely fine with. With all the exercise that I have to be doing, the cardio and stuff, like my knees, if I'm standing up straight and like trying to be in like a neutral, comfortable position, first of all, I cannot find that. Second of all, what my knees want to do is they want to lock back because they sort of hyperextend, which is not a very good place for your knees to be sitting. So I've sort of started wearing these like knee braces, which has sort of helped with that. So I've figured out that like my right leg has been much less toned or less muscular than my left, which tells me that the leg that has all the injuries, which is my left and has more muscular definition, is doing much more work than the other leg is. So I've sort of had to correct my walking style and stuff like that. And I was discussing this with my physio, and as we were like talking about it and stuff, and I was like, yeah, like I feel like because I'm so anxious that I find it really difficult to relax and like to just be comfortable in my body.
Yeah.
And then she brought up somebody who was also at the physio school. She's like, well, that's interesting because there's somebody here called Gerard Farrell who has recently completed his PhD studies on the vagus nerve. Which have you heard anything about that?
I have indeed. It's the one that goes right down through the center and then connects to your jaw and then down the center of the body.
So it connects from your pineal gland, and it sort of, I think it branches out a few different places, but one of the easiest places to access it is it sort of goes down between your left ear and your neck.
Okay.
So like I had heard a bunch about this as well. It sounded a little woo-woo to me. Like there was sort of, homeopaths that are just sort of like, yeah, if you massage it, you can sort of like help.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh yeah, sure.
And I tried it and I was like, wow, I don't feel completely different now, so I must be wrong.
Yep.
Anyway, I digress. So his PhD studies were, because he physio is his like realm. So part of his PhD was that he was interested in the vagus nerve and sort of like massage that might help stimulate it and bring some relief. And a part of doing a PhD is you have to explore alternate methods than just like the initial one. So he ended up experimenting with a TENS machine. Do you know what that is?
Yes, my ex-girlfriend had very severe endometriosis, so she was actually prescribed a TENS machine that she used daily. So, and she was like, hey, you want to try it? And I was like, yeah, like why not? So I have the experience. So yeah.
So basically, I made an appointment with him, and I told him like my symptoms and how anxious I am daily. And initially he sort of was like, okay, well, let's try some like cold immersion therapy. Yep. We discussed it, and I've sort of just like, there have been times where I've tried like cold showers and stuff and they've just not, like cold to my body is quite intense and quite painful.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Yeah, which I think is part of having a highly dysregulated nervous system. But we did discuss it, and I was sort of just like, I don't feel like this for me is like an appropriate long-term solution, maybe short-term. So then we moved on to discussing the TENS machine. So basically he told me, before I go on, I have to say, people listening, do not try this at home without a professional.
Yep, speak to a medical professional before you do any of this stuff.
Yep, if you need to make an appointment with Gerard, you're welcome to do so through the physio school, the Otago Physio School of Physiotherapy.
Nice.
Yep. So now that I've just covered myself, now let's get into it. So this, for me to sort of stimulate my vagus nerve.
Yep.
So I use a TENS machine, which is basically just like a small electrotherapy machine where you can plug in some like hydrogel pads, which,
I didn't know you could add the hydrogel pads.
Yeah. So they just sort of stick on in whatever designated area.
Yeah.
So for me, I first of all remove any external headphones. So even if it's like in the other ear, we're not doing that. And also any metal, like ear jewelry. And then I will take one of them and I will stick the hydrogel pad over top of my left ear.
Okay.
Has to be the left side.
Right.
Cannot be the right side because there's too many nerves connecting to like the heart and stuff like that. Also, this may not be like a viable option for somebody who might have like heart electrical issues.
Yeah, or if you have like really, really sensitive skin, for example, like eczema or another type of skin condition, I probably would recommend speaking to a medical professional first.
I place one over my ear and then I sort of place one, so right at the back of the skull how you've got that knuckle.
At the base of your, because that's the thinnest part of your skull, I remember.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you sort of start there and trace your finger down maybe an inch or so and then move it to the left so it just sort of goes over the like neck muscle there and just place it like on the side of your neck.
Right.
Which is where I do it anyway. And then I sort of turn up the little electrical shock moment divas up until they're sort of like They're high, but it's not, like, painful.
Yeah. For those who are curious, actually, a TENS machine does not feel like if you, like, touch an electric fence, for example. Like, it's not, like, the instant, like, intense electric shock pain.
Yeah.
It's like a low kind of buzzy pain that you can increase.
Yeah, at like a sort of a low amount for me. It almost just feels like an extra heartbeat.
Yeah, I mean, and I found that like, oh man, this is such a specific reference. Do you remember hex bugs? Like back in the early 2000s, there were those little, you could make them out of toothbrushes, but they had professional ones too. And you attach 2 batteries on the top of a toothbrush end, and then you turn on the batteries and it vibrates itself across the floor.
No, okay. I do not remember that, but thank you.
That was the thing. My brother was really obsessed with them. You could build like structures for them to move through and stuff. Yeah, great for the, what's it called, enrichment.
Very that.
For me, that's what it feels like on like a really low setting. It's kind of just like that. The whole thing is buzzing rather than like an instant shock.
And this was like my first time using a TENS machine ever. So I was like, oh, what's going on here? Yeah, so he showed me how to use it and all that stuff. And then, because initially this was sort of prescribed to me so that I could potentially improve my sleep, because my sleep is atrocious. After our appointment that evening, because he gave me a TENS machine, that evening I placed it where he said, and then I used it for maybe 30 minutes. So when I was just like in my bedroom, it was 10:30 p.m. My ADHD medication was long out of my system, and I was just relaxing in my bedroom. And I was scrolling on like TikTok or whatever, just relaxing. And after like using it immediately, I sort of felt this like calmness sort of come over me, almost as if like if any of you have tried meditation, it almost felt like very quickly I felt like I had been meditating for much longer than I had actually been sitting there.
Right.
So I did that for half an hour and I sort of felt some relaxation, which was lovely. And then after the 30 minutes, I turned it off and took the pads off.
Yeah.
And then I noticed that my whole body felt relaxed. I felt a hit of dopamine like sort of come through my brain, which I am not used to. Like,
you're like, what's this?
Unmedicated dopamine? Who is this?
Yeah, hello?
Yeah. So it was quite interesting. And then also I noticed that I was smiling.
Oh, yo.
in my bedroom alone. I was like, what?
What the hell?
What is this witchery? What is going on here?
Yeah.
And then the longer I sort of sat without these on, the more I noticed how quiet my brain was.
Yeah.
And I have ADHD and autism, so my brain is never quiet.
Nope.
And I was just like, wow, like this is what having a regulated nervous system feels like.
Yeah.
And so like I had gone after 30 minutes with this little machine, I had gone from completely dysregulated, highly anxious person to completely regulated, no anxiety, no stress.
Yeah.
Even my like ADHD symptoms had almost completely disappeared at this stage. To which, so obviously this was quite profound for me because I have not experienced this ever.
Yeah.
And then the more I sort of like walked around my room, I noticed that my body was walking normally again because obviously I had to correct my walking style to sort of counteract how my injuries on my other side were sort of going.
Yeah.
And I wasn't having to sort of like be in my mind like, make sure you go heel toe, make sure you engage this muscle, make sure you engage this. I wasn't having to do any of that. My body was just walking how it should have been.
You like factory reset your brain pretty much. Like that's what it sounds like.
Literally. That is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And then, I just sort of sat with that and I was just thinking, and it's like when your brain is that quiet, when it's not used to being that quiet, like the thoughts that come into your head are just so like mundane and helpful. And I was just like, wow, I really need to replace my water bottle because it has a hole in it and it keeps leaking on me when I drink from it in the morning or whatever. And I have been needing to do this for so long. And it's just, that's never been a thought that's popped into my head except for when I'm actually taking a drink and it's like, oh, cool, now it's on my clothes.
Yep.
And then I was sort of just like, wow, this is actually insane that I can achieve this. Because the amount of times that I've been given tips like, oh, if you're just like mindfulness, I'm like, mindfulness has never done anything for me.
Exactly.
If it's done things for you guys, excellent,
Great.
fantastic. We love that.
Yeah.
But for me personally, I have not experienced that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that night, I ended up getting into bed, like, because normally I wait until far too late to actually, like, take out my contact lenses to brush my teeth and all that
I'm the
stuff.
same, yeah.
But then this night, because I wasn't so high-strung, I was just like, well, let's just do that now so that I don't have to do that later. So I was ready for bed probably an hour before. And then I got into bed and I was just sort of like laying there. And the way that my nervous system felt, I felt like a child.
Yeah.
I felt like a 6-year-old in bed at like a relative's house because I had so few problems in that moment that it was just like, it was just me in a bed in a safe home, nothing else. And I was like, wow, the fact that my immediate response is to relate having a regulated nervous system to being 6 years old tells me that I've been horrendously dysregulated since the age of 6.
Since that time, yeah, exactly.
Which is interesting because that's roughly about when school starts.
Yeah. It's interesting as well because I remember not my current therapist, but the previous one, we were kind of talking about the ways that, like, when we experience, even if it's not necessarily like a massive singular traumatic event, even if it's just like a series of smaller traumatic events that build up over time, our brain kind of takes like a snapshot of that moment so that when we are adults and we are re-traumatized in the same way. So, for example, let's just say for the sake of the argument, you were like bullied really badly by somebody in primary school, and then you see them again as an adult, and then you react in a really like weirdly childish way. That's because your brain has saved the 7-year-old version of yourself, and that's the version of yourself that is reacting to that trauma.
Yeah.
So like, because trauma, like memories, they don't age. They stay like relatively static.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really interesting because I find like memory and stuff really, really fascinating in the way that like the body holds that. But yeah.
So I was just sort of like very quickly, my whole body just relaxed and it was like, obviously I was holding a lot of tension, which was keeping me from just using my body comfortably. Yeah. When I woke up, found myself in like a pattern of thinking like, oh my God, like I've hit the reset button. My life will be completely different from here on out into the future. The future has never looked so bright to me ever. So, and because of that, obviously my brain was like, beep, beep, boop, 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 boop. So I didn't actually get to sleep till probably at least 2 a.m. And then the next day I sort of woke up and I still had a lot of the residual stuff from that. But then after that, I had the week from hell.
Yep.
Some of the stuff I've told you about. So that started literally the day after and continued.
Yep.
And basically hasn't stopped since.
That's a hubris check from the gods, just so you know.
Yeah, just be like, I know you thought...
Slow down, honey.
Yeah, it's like, hey, don't count your chickens all at once, babe. We've got roughly 3 minutes left, by the way.
Okay, perfect.
So although like that beautiful, like completely reset, completely regulated nervous system did not last forever up until now, I was able to use the TENS machine to, when like... almost put into a highly anxious, like close to panic mode, like the knots in the stomach. I was able to use the TENS machine to bring me back down to like a baseline, which I've not found anything that helps that. Because like if I experience conflict, typically I will not get back to baseline until the following day. Even if like, you know, an apology happens or whatever.
Or gets resolved.
Exactly. I may not be able to actually reduce my fight or flight response back down to baseline. So most of this is basically just because my body has been stuck in a fight or flight response, and it's like whenever I'm in public, I walk super fast. I don't typically walk on the heels of my the heels of my foot. I typically don't walk on. Usually, I favor the balls of my feet, which means that I skip a whole bunch of like valuable walking things that I need to be doing, which has been a component into my injuries and stuff because obviously one leg's doing more than the other, but then neither of them are actually doing the full correct walking cycle. But then after using the machine the following day, I was able to more comfortably walk out in public.
Yeah.
And I was able to go to the supermarket and exist there for much longer. Like normally by the time I'm paying, I'm like,
yeah.
But like this day I wasn't doing that. And I was sort of waiting for a friend who I bumped into. And then there was someone who was making eyes at me. And I was like, oh hello, hi. And I was able to make eye contact.
Oh, nice.
It was beautiful.
Yeah, I guess like just like kind of closing us off, like one of the really good takeaways, especially for those who are like very like who are listening, who are like younger people or who might have been living with a particular chronic condition for a while. You do not have to exist in that state forever.
Exactly.
Like there is something out there that will work, and it's just kind of sometimes we don't have the resources necessarily at the time to find it, but eventually we will find something.
Yes.
And so you don't have to sort of resign yourself to being miserable for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And if you can't use like a TENS machine or whatever, go on TikTok. There are some people who have some stretches that target the vagus nerve specifically.
Yeah.
I've tried
see a
some.
massage therapist because they specialize in that nerve stuff
Ooh.
too. Yeah. I'll talk to you about this after.
Yeah, please do. So that's all the time we have for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you want to look into it, contact the Physio School.
Yeah.
We love you loads.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.
And that's a wrap for today. Diversity Dispatch airs fortnightly on Thursdays at 5 p.m. So if you like today's episode, then be sure to join us in a couple of weeks for the next installment on ORFM.
And check out the podcast on oar.org.nz and your favourite podcast platforms. Tune in for more chill chats, fun facts, and upcoming local events on Diversity Dispatch.
This podcast was produced by ORFM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.